Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing really well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad you've joined me for the final part of the story, because it gets incredibly intriguing and very, very exciting, and will hopefully have you on the edge of your seat. So we are learning about some strange things that have happened on the Rabbit's Warren Trail. People describing paradoxical events, the feeling of being watched, the sense that they're not alone. Somebody saw somebody chopping wood that disappeared before their very eyes, like a ghostly apparition. So this is a strange trail that Liesl and Deborah are taking. They're going for a lovely walk, and people have experienced missing time on this trail. So let's see what happens to them, shall we? But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with the final, very intriguing part of our story tonight. Liesl had been extremely eager to take the Rabbit's Warren Trail after reading some of the rather unorthodox remarks in the visitor's book by guests that had left her extremely intrigued. She had sneakily checked the time on the clock when they left the cabin, and noticed it was 2:10 in the afternoon. She wanted to see if she and Deborah would experience any weird time discrepancies. She was rather hoping they would. It would lend a degree of mysticism to their walk. Now that she and Deborah had found the path through the trees with the arrow and signpost which read Rabbit's Warren Trail, she could understand why the Rabbit's Warren Trail was called as such. No other name would actually have sufficed. The woodgrove was alive with delightful little rabbits that were bounding up and down the trail. Some were black and white, others grey. There were so many varieties. All of them were adorable, but none of them showed any signs of tameness. And on seeing the two women, they quickly scurried away. Liesl and Deborah also scared off a couple of deer that scampered away the moment they encountered them, and they noticed a rather boldly assertive cheeky squirrel that followed them along the path as it darted from one tree to the next. Certainly out of all the animals in the woodgrove, this little mischievous squirrel appeared to have taken a keen interest in the two women who had entered his green leafy world. The woods were alive with pretty bird song, and a soft sunlight trickled through the canopy of the trees, showering the undergrowth in an ethereal glaze, which was bewitching to say the very least. Liesl could not help but think that some people's random comments made in the visitor's book had been right on the money. There was no doubt in her mind that there was something very out-of-worldly about this trail. They had been on the Pilgrim's Trail earlier on in the morning, and it hadn't felt like this. On the Rabbit's Warren's Trail, it did feel as if they'd slipped into another world. She wondered if Deborah felt the same. And before she could ask her friend about this, and what she thought about the trail, Deborah spontaneously said, "This woodgrove is extraordinary, don't you think, Liesl? I've been in woods before, because I enjoy walking in wooded areas, but I've never been in woods like this. I feel almost as if we've entered a children's fairy tale, through a door in our world. I keep having to pinch myself to tell myself this is real. But something doesn't feel real about any of this." "You're right about that," Liesl admitted. "You took the words straight out of my head, rather eloquently, I might add. The Rabbit's Warren Trail just doesn't feel like your regular woodgrove, does it? But then again, so many of these remarkable trees are incredibly old. Think about that for a moment. They were here long before we were even born, which is a sobering thought, don't you think?" As the two women happily sashayed down the trail, Liesl noticed that every now and then that Deborah was slipping out the red box from her pocket in her puffer jacket that contained her beautiful diamond engagement ring. She wanted to look at it all the time. She'd remove the box, open the lid, and stare wondrously at the gleaming diamond. She wore a huge, contented, almost cheesy grin on her face, and looked so desperately happy. Of course she should be delighted with the beautiful diamond in the red box, Liesl thought to herself. She'd only just got engaged. Liesl could not help feel a tad uneasy that Deborah had brought the red box along with her on the walk. It was a pity the ring was too big to fit her finger. Of course she could understand how excited her best friend was to have the engagement ring now in her possession. She had talked about it for long enough. But Liesl was worried about Deborah dropping the box on the trail. If that were to happen, she'd never find it again. Liesl didn't want to spoil the mood of the walk by being pedantic. Still, she told herself, they were only going to take a short excursion down the trail, and then they'd be back at the cabin in no time at all. She didn't want to spoil the mood of this special day for Deborah by stealing some of her joy. Very suddenly Liesl stopped short in her tracks and whispered, "Listen! Can you hear that, Deborah?" Deborah stood still for a moment. She hadn't heard anything, but now that she began to pay attention, she could hear the sound of wood being chopped. Deborah and Liesl exchanged puzzled glances, with their curiosity twitching like a rabbit's nose. They stepped up their pace down the trail, moving towards the sound. That was when they saw him, a man wearing breeches and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up past the elbows. He was chopping wood very efficiently, with a pickaxe. The two women said nothing as they stood there on the footpath, watching the stranger chopping wood, wondering what to make of it, for something seemed so out of place about this man, rather like a jigsaw piece that belongs to another puzzle. They both instinctively felt as if they were watching a snapshot in history being replayed back in our time. The man didn't look as if he was dressed in 20th century clothes, but looked like someone you might see in an old history book. On sensing someone was behind him, the man suddenly turned around rather abruptly to look at them. He looked as real as someone you might see pushing a trolley around Walmart. Only if that were the case, everyone would probably stop and stare at him, as he would not easily mould into 20th century life. He looked at the two women with a strange, "What are you doing here?" expression on his face, as if he was as surprised to see them as they were to see him. He rubbed his sweaty brow for a second, almost as if he thought he might be hallucinating and seeing things that weren't actually there. It was then that Deborah said good afternoon to him. The man looked at her for a moment, and he looked as if he was about to answer her back, but very suddenly he faded before their eyes, as did the pile of wood he'd been chopping. Both Deborah and Liesl looked at each other incredulously, feeling ever so slightly spooked by the rather cryptic event. "What the hell?" said Liesl. "Where did he go? And where is the wood he was chopping? He was here 2 seconds ago. Then he just dissipated like the steam from a kettle. You saw him too, didn't you, Deborah?" "I saw him," Deborah admitted. "This wood grove is scaring the bejesus out of me, Liesl. I think we saw a ghost. I've got the chills." "Me too," Liesl admitted. "I know the apparition we saw was probably harmless enough, but I feel freaked out by this. Oh, goodness gracious, I don't like it in here at all. Let's head back to the cabin. Remember one of the visitors' entries I read to you? The woman mentioned she believed they'd seen a ghost. They described a similar man cutting wood. We must have seen the same apparition that they did." "You're right," said Deborah. "I'm not comfortable that we saw a ghost. I feel very disquieted and haunted by this experience. Something feels completely out of place in here. Notice all the bird song has all vanished. And where are all the rabbits? Let's go before something bizarre happens." The two women, both feeling slightly on edge about their mysterious ghostly encounter, along with the disturbing fact that the woodgrove had suddenly grown airily quiet, which was only serving to encourage the feelings of trepidation to grow in intensity. There was no sign of life in the grove, and even the inquisitive squirrel that had been following them around earlier for most of the walk had all but vanished. The two women, feeling slightly flustered and unnerved, began hurriedly walking back to the cabin as briskly as they possibly could. But at one point, as they ambled up a large camel-like hump in the ground, Deborah tripped over a burgeoning root, spraining her ankle. "Damn! Ouch, this hurts!" she cried out, as she tried to get to her feet, but it was a struggle to get up, until Liesl, with her hand as an anchor, helped her friend get up. "Are you all right?" she asked, worry creasing her brow. "I think I will be, but boy does it hurt! I've definitely sprained my ankle," said Deborah, trying to balance her foot on the ground and hobbling a little. "Ouch! Ouch! It hurts! It's so painful! I can't believe I fell. That root tripped me up. I never saw it." Liesl bent down to examine Deborah's ankle, that was very swollen and red. "You don't look like you've broken anything," she said, rubbing her hands around the swelling on Deborah's ankle to increase the circulation and hopefully decrease the pain. "You've definitely sprained your ankle. My guess is in the morning you'll have a nasty bruise there. Do you think you can walk on your ankle, or does it hurt too much?" "I think the pain is subsiding a little. I think I'll manage to walk back to the cabin," said Deborah, determined to head back as quickly as she could. She certainly did not want to stay on the rabbit's warren trail for a moment longer, if she could possibly help it, as the thought of running into any spectral beings did not sit comfortably with her. She was limping badly for a while. The pain was excruciating. She hobbled awkwardly on the trail, but thankfully the path flattened out. It was a while before, suddenly, the woman heard the giggling sound. Deborah and Liesel looked at each other in astonishment. "You hear that?" said Deborah suddenly, becoming increasingly annoyed. Her cheeks were burning, and a red colour swept across her face. "Someone is laughing at me! You hear that, Liesel? They're laughing at me!" "Don't be silly," said Liesel reassuringly. "It's probably nothing. No one's laughing at you. I'm telling you, Liesel, someone is laughing at me because I'm hobbling along this trail." "You think that's funny?" she shouted out, fisting the air furiously. "You think it's funny, do you, because I hurt myself? Because I fell? Get stuffed!" she shouted, not really knowing who or what had provoked her to anger. But someone had been making fun of her. She was certain of it, and for that she was not remotely amused. It wasn't long before the scenery became familiar at this point, and Deborah appeared to be walking pretty well, even though her ankle was still tender to the touch. And that was when the woman happily saw the sign for the rabbit's warren trail, and knew they were nearly back at the cabin. And within a short walk, and a little extra effort, they were back to the familiarity they'd been craving. They didn't realize it had grown incredibly dark, and that was when they saw James standing outside the cabin door, in his navy puffer jacket, looking far from amused, and relieved to see the both of them. "Where the hell have you been?" he asked. "You've been gone for a long time. I remember falling asleep on the chair by the wood-burning stove. I heard you mention you were going for a walk, a short walk, but you've been gone for ages." "No, we haven't been gone for long," said Liesel abruptly. "You're exaggerating, James. I checked the time when we left. It was 2:10 in the afternoon. My guess is we've been gone for no more than 35 minutes or so." James gave Liesel a contemptuous glare, as if showing her he was far from happy that she'd been swanning off with his fiancée for most of the afternoon. "Is this one of your warp jokes, Liesel? You haven't been gone for 30 minutes, and you know it. You've been gone for hours." "So what's the time, then?" asked Liesel, realizing that it was indeed getting dark. It should be about 3 in the afternoon, she thought, but it felt closer to 6 in the evening. "It's 6:15, if you must know," said James, frowning. Deborah nudged Liesel and whispered, "Don't mention anything to James about what we saw in the woods. James will think we're inebriated and seeing things that aren't there. You know how he reacted to the visitor's book when you read it to him. He said there was no such things as time anomalies, but we've just experienced one. We should have been back here at 3 o'clock, and it's now 6:15. So it goes to show that there really is something peculiar about the rabbit's warren trail. But what it is, God only knows." "Don't worry, my lips are sealed," Liesel assured her. Both women hung their puffer jackets on the hooks in the entrance hall, while James hurriedly prepared the meal for the 2 exhausted women, who had suddenly become extremely fatigued, so much so that they could barely keep their eyes open. James suspected that they had been on an excessively long walk, and that Liesel had lied to him about being out for 30 minutes, when she knew they'd been out for a lot longer. The woman probably felt bad that they'd left him in the cabin on his own for so long, and were trying to make excuses for themselves. It was so typical of women to be like this. It was around the cosy flames of the wood-burning stove that the 3 of them thoroughly enjoyed a glass of wine together, along with some slices of avocado toast with poached egg. And then tiredness consumed them all, and even James appeared to be nodding off again. So they all decided to retire to bed, where the moment their heads hit the pillows, they were fast asleep and out for the count. It was at about 7 o'clock in the morning that Deborah woke up with quite the start, engulfed by a dreadful feeling of great panic, as she remembered the events of the previous afternoon. She was thinking about the ghostly encounter that they had had in the woods, and the giggling that had erupted after she'd fallen over a root in the ground and twisted her ankle quite badly. It was not the events of the previous day that bothered her so much. What was concerning her was the thought of her diamond ring in the little red box that was in the pocket of her puffer jacket, which she hadn't seen in quite a while. She had been so exhausted and fatigued when she came back to the cabin, as if she'd been walking for many hours, that she'd all but forgotten about her ring. She quickly jumped out of her bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floor. There was a biting nip in the air, but Deborah ignored it, scurrying to the hall to get to her red puffer jacket. Her heart was now pounding violently in her chest. Please God, may the diamond ring be there, she thought. Please God. But when she dipped her hand into the pockets of her red puffer jacket and discovered to her horror that the ring was missing, she began to flap anxiously, like a pigeon trapped in a house trying to escape out of a closed window. "Oh, my goodness, I've lost my ring," she inwardly screamed. "I must have dropped it when I fell over that burgeoning root in the ground and sprained my ankle." Deborah knew she couldn't let James know she'd lost the expensive diamond ring that he'd practically had to break the bank to buy her. Deborah clandestinely slipped into the spare room in the cabin, where Liesl was sleeping alone in her bed. She began to shake her vigorously. Liesl grumbled, making an aggrieved moaning sound. She slowly slipped open one eye and then the next, and sat up rather bemused, looking at Deborah, with a rather befuddled expression on her face. "What the hell? What are you doing here, Deborah? I'm trying to sleep. What's your problem? Why are you waking me up so early?" Deborah could barely say the words. There was a huge nauseous lump developing at the back of her throat that had suddenly become extremely scratchy. "What is it?" asked Liesl, sensing there was something very wrong with Deborah. I've lost my diamond engagement ring," said Deborah, choking on her words. "You've lost it?" asked Liesl, sitting up sharply. "You're kidding, right? Is this some kind of weird joke? Because if it is, I'm not laughing. You haven't lost your ring, have you?" "I'm not joking," said Deborah, shaking her head vigorously, a tear now splashing down her cheek. "I think it must have fallen out of my pocket when we were on the trail. I lost my footing, didn't I? I think the box might have fallen out of my pocket. Maybe it went flying to the bottom of that mound. I can't believe this has happened. What am I going to do, Liesl? James is going to kill me if I've lost the ring. He was complaining how excessively expensive it was, and now this has to happen. He'll never forgive me for this." "You shouldn't have taken the box with you on the trail, Deborah. I warned you not to. What were you thinking? We've got to go and look for that ring before James wakes up. If he knows you've lost it, well, I don't know how he's going to react. You're right. It cost him a fortune buying that ring for you. It came with a lot of sacrifice on his part, and you know it as well as I do. What am I going to do, Liesl? I'm such an idiot." "Don't panic," said Liesl. "We'll find the ring. Get dressed. Make sure you don't wake James up. We need to be very quiet. We'll leave him a note and tell him we went for a walk. I'm sorry, Deborah. Whether you like it or not, we're going to have to embark on the Rabbit's Warrens trail again." It must have been about 10 minutes past 7 when the two women sneakily slipped out of the cabin together. Deborah's heart was now galloping in her chest as she felt the very real self-condemning fear that maybe they would not recover the ring, and that if that were the case, James would not be best pleased with her, and worse still, she could hardly expect her fiancé to get her another engagement ring. But then again, she wouldn't have lost the damn ring if James had managed to get her the correct size, she told herself. How many times had she told him the size of her ring finger? But no, he didn't listen. So losing the ring was partly his fault. If it was gone for good, James was partly responsible. She was looking so forward to returning home and showing everyone she was officially engaged. She couldn't wait to show them the ring that James had given her. But what if the ring was gone for good? Then James and his proposal would seem like a non-starter, and the thought that she might not be able to show off her big rock to her friends was breaking her heart into pieces. How could this be happening to her? It was so unfair. The proposal that she had experienced was supposed to be the best thing to happen to her, but after the walk down the Rabbit's Warren trail, everything had gone badly awry, and she felt sick to her stomach. "Stop dawdling, Deborah. For goodness sake, girl, get it together," snapped Liesl, pushing Deborah forward on the trail, forgetting that only the day previously Deborah had badly sprained her ankle, which was now quite bruised and puffy, and was likely still tender to walk on. "We need to find the mound in the ground where you tripped, and then hopefully we will recover the red box containing your ring. Luckily the ring is inside the box, for thankfully that will be a whole lot easier to be able to find. A ring would be another story altogether. Please God, may it be there, said Deborah. I don't know what I'm going to do if I've lost it. The two women wasted no time in charging down the rabbit's warren trail, forgetting how much trepidation it had caused them the previous day, for they were keeping their eyes pinned to the ground, looking for any signs of the missing red box. Deborah was so extremely focused that she didn't pay much attention to her immediate surroundings. She didn't appear to notice the pronounced chill in the air, the breeze brushing unabashedly against her cheeks, or the way that the trees were whispering in the wind. She didn't notice the pounding pain of her ankle as she dashed eagerly down the paths. Her heart beat wildly in her chest, while the taste of nausea rose up in the back of her throat, which made her feel that in any second she wanted to vomit, for the fear that maybe she'd never find the missing red box. There were rabbits sauntering happily down the woodland paths, and the squirrel from the day before had made an unlikely appearance again, and seemed genuinely pleased to see the two women, following them through the woods. But Deborah didn't smile at the humour of the situation, for her heart was heavy. Finally they reached the large mound in the ground that erupted through the earth like a bloated pustule that was on the verge of bursting. Deborah glanced around the mound, where the burgeoning root had angrily spread out its large tentacles through the soil, and grabbed her ankle. But she saw no sign of the little red box anywhere. "It's not here," said Liesel, looking up at her friend gingerly. "I'm sorry, but it's not here." "But it has to be," said Deborah. "We've got to find it. We can't leave the grove without it. It's got to be somewhere. It has to be." "Don't panic, Deborah," said Liesel reassuringly, putting a comforting arm around her friend. "You're right, the red box must be here somewhere. We need to retrace our steps and look through the vegetation, all the flora and fauna, and see if we can see it anywhere. It must have fallen out of your pocket, so if we retrace our steps, I'm sure we'll find it." But after frantically searching in all the undergrowth and everywhere they could for the box, it was nowhere to be found. And that was when the laughing began all over again, like it had done the day before, when Deborah had fallen and sprained her ankle, and had been hobbling around awkwardly down the footpaths. When she'd got back on her feet, Deborah recognised the laughter at once, and she became enraged all over again. She felt as if something was definitely poking fun at her and laughing at her expense, and she didn't like it one bit, especially now that she was increasingly frustrated because she couldn't find the missing red box. It was as if her anger was fueling somebody else's entertainment. Whoever was laughing was definitely laughing at her. Deborah reacted adversely by shouting out into the woods, although no one was there. She didn't know who she was shouting at, for the woodgrove appeared silent, apart from the trills of the pretty bird song and the rustle of the leaves being blown by the cool breeze. Deborah could not see who was laughing at her. Maybe it was the ghostly spectre of the woodcutter she'd seen the day before, chopping wood. But he looked too serious a type to make fun of anyone. Whoever was laughing at her, she was going to let them have it, because if there was anything Deborah disliked, it was being the butt of somebody else's jokes. For a moment she'd forgotten she was looking for the red box containing her precious engagement ring, for she suddenly felt like a billy goat that wanted to headbutt whoever was laughing at her. She didn't hear Liesel trying to calm her down, as Liesel knew that Deborah could easily fly off the handle if she got mad enough. "Deborah," she whispered, "don't lose it, please. You know what people said about the rabbit's warren trail? They described it as outer-worldly. Maybe you heard a disembodied laughter or something. Maybe it was a ghostly entity laughing at you. Don't pay it any attention. Maybe that's what it wants. Just ignore it. That's what I would do." Deborah had not heard Liesel's soothing voice, trying to reassure her not to get worked up. She began shouting at the trees, for no one else was in sight. "You think this is funny, do you?" she shouted out, once again fisting the air like she had done the previous day. She charged towards some thick bushes, where she believed the laughter was coming from. She pulled back a curtain of foliage and gasped, because she couldn't believe what she was observing. At this point, Liesel, who was standing close beside her, was also having a similar reaction, for neither woman could comprehend what they were seeing. Standing before them, looking quite surprised that her hiding place had been discovered, was a juvenile female Bigfoot. Deborah knew this instinctively, because the female Bigfoot had a young energy about her, and her breasts were beginning to develop, as if she was equivalent to a human teenager, probably a 14 or 15-year-old girl. The Bigfoot was covered with dark hair and was under 6 foot tall, but probably had a lot more growing to do, and had not filled out. But despite being a juvenile, she was enormously muscular, with a human-like face and kind treacle-coloured eyes that seemed both spirited and amused. And then when the Bigfoot realised she had an audience, she began to mimic Deborah falling over the mound, getting up with a sprained ankle and limping down the footpath. And her performance was so spectacularly good that Deborah and Liesl could not help themselves. They cracked up laughing. Deborah, realising she was being reenacted by the Bigfoot, realised her whole belly was quivering because she was laughing so much, because the little Bigfoot was so funny. Liesl began to clap her hands to applaud the Bigfoot's performance, and the Bigfoot, realising she had an appreciative audience, began to reenact Deborah falling all over again, and once again the two women fell over with laughter. All of a sudden footsteps could be heard walking down the footpath. The female Bigfoot's eyes widened. She looked a little affrighted, and quickly shot away, disappearing from their sight. The two women looked up to see James coming down the footpath. He didn't look in the least bit amused. "Hello, sweetheart," said Deborah, trying to put a fake smile on her face.
"Oh, well, hello! What is wrong with the both of you?"
said James, sounding incredibly annoyed.
"I wake up to find you're missing. Then I find your note. Gone for a walk, you have. Down this trail. Honestly, what are you like? Why do I get the feeling the two of you want to hang around together and leave me alone in the cabin, twiddling my fingers all day long? I thought we'd do things together like the Three Musketeers. But no, once again you decide to wander off like this, leaving me to my own devices. I really feel as if I'm not wanted on this trip."
"I'm sorry, James, it wasn't like that at all," Deborah reassured him, taking her fiancé's arm in hers. "You looked so peaceful when you were fast asleep, so I wanted to leave you as you were. I didn't want to wake you up," she lied. Her words seemed to appease James, who gave her a kiss on the cheek and said,
"I'm sorry I overreacted. I just want us to do things together as a team on this trip, that's all. And I wouldn't have been adverse to getting up early myself, if you'd wanted to go for a leisurely walk."
"Well, you're here now," said Liesl, with a warm, encouraging smile, "so you can enjoy the rest of the hike with us." She had said this because she surreptitiously wanted to keep her eyes pinned to the ground in case the red box could be found, but there was no sign of it anywhere. When they returned to the cabin, Liesl was pleased to see that they hadn't lost any time. James had said he'd prepared the breakfast for them, and began building a fire pit outside the cabin, where he started to cook burgers and sausages, and the smells were delicious. When Liesl and Deborah were alone in the cabin, they earnestly talked about the Bigfoot they had encountered. "I can't believe these things are real," said Deborah, looking confounded. "She was a sweet little thing, wasn't she? When she reenacted my falling and getting up to my feet and hobbling like that, it was like watching the best comedy show I've ever seen in my life. Too bad James scared her away," said Liesl regrettably. "What are we going to do?" said Deborah suddenly. "How am I going to tell James about my missing engagement ring?" "You're going to have to tell him," said Liesl. "I mean, you dropped it on the trail, didn't you? You're going to have to come clean with him." "But he's going to be mad, isn't he?" "Well, tell him after he's eaten a bit, because a hungry man is not someone you want to poke with a stick, do you?" said Liesl. Deborah could barely eat the delicious breakfast her husband had cooked, but she waited patiently until he'd eaten his fill, and then she said very nervously, "James, I've got something I need to tell you. You're not going to like it, I'm afraid."
"What is it?" asked James, looking up at Deborah. "Whatever it is, I can see it's bothering you. So spill."
"She's worried you're going to get angry with her, James," said Liesl, leaping to her best friend's defence. "Please don't get angry with Deborah. I want to remind you that this is the weekend you got engaged. Don't forget that. You don't want to tarnish it with any outbursts of anger, do you?"
"Of course not," said James. "Whatever it is that's bothering you, you can tell me, Deborah. I promise you I won't get mad."
"Well, I've lost my engagement ring," said Deborah. "I don't know where it is."
"You've lost it?" asked James, looking incredulous. "You know how expensive it was? What do you mean by you've lost it?"
"Well, exactly that. When Liesel and I went on a walk down the Rabbit's Warren Trail yesterday, well, I took the box with the ring in it. I kept it in my pocket with me, 'cause I wanted to look at it all the time."
"Why the hell would you do something as stupid as that?" asked James.
"I don't know. I guess I wanted the ring close to me. I did have a fall in the grove, you see. I sprained my ankle. I think the red box fell out of my pocket. That's why we got up early this morning, James, to look for it. But we've searched everywhere, and it's nowhere to be found."
"That's too bad," said James. "That was an expensive engagement ring. You do realise I can't buy you another one."
"But you're not mad?" asked Deborah, looking amazed. "You're not going to blow a tantrum, are you?"
"Of course I'm not mad, nor am I going to have a tantrum. A ring is a material thing, and in the grand scheme of things it doesn't really matter. What matters is our love. And that's what I've been saying to you all along."
For the rest of the weekend at the cabin, the ring was no longer discussed, although Deborah thought about it all the time, and really regretted that she had carried it around in her pocket. She was, of course, relieved that James had not got mad with her about losing the ring. It was as they were driving away from the cabin, in James's red Jeep Wrangler, that he asked Deborah to open the glove box for him, to get him one of the boiled sweets from one of the tins. And when Deborah opened the glove box, she gasped when she discovered the red box was in the glove box. She grabbed the box, and with fumbling fingers opened it nervously, and was amazed to see it contained her diamond engagement ring. "James! Look at this! I don't understand! What's this doing here?"
"It's simple. I found the box in your puffer jacket," said James. "It was hanging up in the entrance hall. I took it and put it in the glove box in my car. I didn't want you to lose it. But when you claimed you had lost it, I thought I'd play along with you and teach you a good lesson."
"But how could you be so cruel, James? You don't know what you've put me through. And what lesson are you talking about anyway?"
"I was trying to show you that a big diamond engagement ring does not reflect my love for you in any way. It's what's in here," he said, pointing at his heart. "Things can get lost, stolen and misplaced, but no one can steal the love in a man's heart."
In the years that followed, Deborah would reflect on the day she lost her diamond engagement ring, and had consequently realised that luxuries, as lovely as they may be, are not what is important when it comes to demonstrating your love. She and James are happily married and have 2 children together, a girl and a boy. Deborah is much more relaxed and easygoing these days, taking life in her stride. Her fascination for luxury items appears to have ebbed away, as she knows now what is important in life, and it's not the things that come with a hefty price tag. She often shares the unorthodox story with her children about the Bigfoot that she encountered, that laughed at her when she fell over and sprained her ankle on the Rabbit Warren Trail. As to why people experience missing time on the Rabbit Warren Trail, or the strange sighting of a ghostly man chopping wood, those questions may never be answered. To this day, Deborah and Liesel remain the very best of friends. So there you are. That's my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and goodbye.